A young child is brutally murdered
He'd been stabbed 13 times.
in his own bed
It's a vicious attack.
with his mother right across the hall.
Julie was hysterical.
The prime suspect, someone no one wanted to imagine.
You're just trying to make sense out of it, and there's no making sense.
When a bizarre twist of fate leads to a shocking new suspect,
I had never seen him before. He definitely was not from around Lawrenceville.
there's a virtual confession to the crime.
I was stunned.
October 13th, 1997. 4:30 a.m. Julie Ray Harper races out of her home in Lawrenceville, Illinois, and pounds on her neighbor's door. An intruder has attacked her and kidnapped her young son, Joel.
She was screaming, "Let me in. They've got Joel. They've got Joel. They took Joel. They kidnapped Joel."
When police arrive, Julie tells them a masked man broke into her home and her son is missing.
I heard a scream and I got up from my bed.
Julie told the police all about this masked intruder and asked them to look for this person. She didn't know if he or somebody else with him had taken Joel out of the house.
Deputy York, who was the first deputy to arrive, he goes to the back door and he discovers the broken glass and he sees blood.
In the hall outside the bedroom, he finds a bloody knife. Then, inside the bedroom, a ghastly discovery. A young boy on the floor.
This is Deputy York. I need an ambulance right away.
10-year-old Joel Kirkpatrick, bleeding and near death.
Joel had been stabbed repeatedly, over 10 times.
He was stabbed through the heart and then on the neck and about his body, but even on his hands and on his wrist, at some point, he knew what was happening to him and he tried to fight it off.
It's a vicious attack, and this deputy actually became ill at the site. That was just a gruesome discovery. I mean, just unimaginable.
Incredibly, the child may still be alive.
When the first police officer arrived on the scene, Joel's body was warm and he felt a pulse.
Paramedics arrive within minutes, but they can do nothing.
It was too late. In fact, Joel was dead on the scene.
Not getting a pulse.
It's a horrific crime, almost impossible to believe, especially for Joel's mother, Julie Harper.
Julie was hysterical. She would go from hysterics to just sitting quietly like, you know, a zombie.
Joel was her only child, and she seemed devoted to him.
Julie treasured and loved Joel more than anything else in the world. He was her first priority.
Now Joel is gone, murdered in his own bed.
You're just trying to make sense out of it, and there's no making sense, wishing it wasn't true.
Investigators are also trying to make sense of the brutal attack.
I was in bed. I was asleep.
Julie tells them she woke in the dead of night, about 4 a.m., to the sound of her son screaming.
And I got out of my bed to find him.
Her initial reaction was that this was Joel having a bad dream, so she's going into this dark room trying to calm him down.
But when she enters the dark room, someone suddenly lunges toward her.
And she's still thinking in her mind that this is Joel having a bad dream. She startled this guy, and he drops the knife, and he starts hitting her.
Horrified, she realizes it's not her son, but some stranger.
There was somebody there.
Julie tells police that I grabbed a hold of his leg and he drugged me on the carpet.
She just wanted to hang on to him and was asking him, "Where's my son?"
Whenever he breaks away, she grabs him again.
She described how she followed him and was hit again. She was very desperate to catch up with this guy.
He got out the back door, out into the garage, and to the back door in the garage. He couldn't open that door.
Frantic to get away, he smashes the glass.
The intruder hit the door with his elbow, and the glass broke out into the yard.
He dragged her outside and finally turned around, banged her head into the ground and went away.
It was only then she was finally able to get a look at the intruder.
He's under a streetlight in the alley, and she's able to glimpse his profile. And that's the profile she gives to police.
Said he was a boy, thin build, had on what she thought to be like cargo pants or sweatpants that were slick and dark, as if they'd had padding in them.
Julie described the assailant as having kind of a dark-colored hair.
He wasn't that tall, he was skinny. Maybe he could have been a teenager, I don't know. I couldn't tell.
So you don't know about what age he was?
I don't.
Anything else?
I've told you everything.
Julie gives the investigators a detailed description of the intruder, but they find no one who matches it. And in a town of fewer than 5,000 people, someone should stand out. This is the kind of place where murders just don't happen.
In a town like Lawrenceville, that sheriff had never seen a murder case, or rarely sees a murder case, and certainly not one like that.
While Julie Ray Harper is at the local hospital being treated for injuries sustained during her desperate battle with the intruder, investigators continue to search for her son's killer.
You heard rumors around town, this person, that person.
Investigators first look at the town's usual suspects, the known troublemakers.
So we're gonna do some business or what?
The police followed leads involving some teenage kids.
Mostly local kids, local high school kids, drug parties, drug motives, things like that.
There's wild parties over there, and maybe some kids got doped up or drunked up and did it.
Hey, dude.
One boy in particular is brought to their attention.
He had allegedly made statements about breaking into the house.
Better hope that your story sticks up, because I'm keeping my eye on you.
Investigators soon dismiss him as just a kid talking big. They also rule out the other teenagers.
Thank you.
They were satisfied that it wasn't them. They had alibis, their parents told them where they were. They submitted to questioning, and it all checked out.
Investigators go back to basics. Who would want to kill Joel Kirkpatrick? Julie Harper suggests a very unusual suspect, one with a highly personal connection to the victim.
When she was asked initially that morning whether she knew of who could have done this, she mentioned her ex-husband.
He might have had something to do with it, I don't know.
What makes you think he might have had something?
I don't know.
Julie recently went through a difficult divorce and a bitter custody battle over Joel, her only son.
When you're thinking of who in the world would do this, who in the world would want to hurt Julie, you got to think that it had something to do with the custody case.
Is it possible Julie's ex is angry enough to cold-bloodedly murder his own child?
Murders of innocent children for no reason at all are usually based out of some highly charged emotional situation. So the history of murder of children shows that many times it is the parent who does it.
But investigators learn Julie's ex-husband was miles away, home in bed with his new wife.
Well, the ex-husband's alibi checks out.
It wasn't him, so there were no other suspects.
Then investigators reconsider everything. They come up with a shocking suspect.
It's hard to believe her story.
There were two people at home that night. One died, one lived. Maybe the angry parent, the killer, is Julie Harper.
This was in the middle of the night, no forced entry, no trail of blood that they would have expected. A murder weapon belonging to her, her actions, her responses. Yes, she was a suspect right off the bat.
The very idea that Julie Ray Harper could have killed her own son divides the small town of Lawrenceville.
There was a segment of the town that really believed that Julie had done it, and then a segment of the town that said, look, no mother who has a good and loving relationship with their son, with no history of violence, with no history of mental illness, would do this.
It's the worst crime any mother can commit, but investigators believe they have the evidence to prove it. Investigators in the savage murder of 10-year-old Joel Kirkpatrick have narrowed the list of possible killers to just one. The last person most would suspect, Joel's mother, Julie Harper. The prosecution's thinking goes this way.
For reasons known only to Julie Ray Harper, she decided that her son would be better off not growing up in the home of the ex-husband that she detested, whether it be to punish him or through some warped sense of he'll be better off in heaven. She decided to kill him, and she did it in a cold-blooded, calculated manner.
The police claimed that Julie had set up the scene, that she had staged the scene.
The signs were all there, they say.
First of all, she said she locked the doors to her home. She definitely locked the doors, she said, over and over. And yet there was no sign of forced entry.
He grabbed me, and he pushed me, and he ran by me. He threw me down.
On top of that, Julie's story about how she fought the attacker doesn't ring true to them.
She claimed that the masked boy jumped up onto the bed and then onto her, like in two moves, and that they together grabbed and wrestled with one another throughout the house. That means they went down a narrow hallway with pictures on the wall, with chairs and tables out through that door, through the garage, and they never disturbed a thing.
The so-called intruder didn't even bring his own weapon.
The knife itself was her own steak knife from a butcher block in the darkened kitchen of her own house, and that was the murder weapon that was placed, not dropped, on the floor between her room and his.
There are no signs that a stranger had been in the house. No fingerprints, no blood, no footprints. The first officer on scene says he even searched the backyard.
There was dew on the ground at that early morning hours. There were no walking away footprints in the dew in the grass that he observed, which would have been there, according to the officer, if that really happened.
Even the injuries Julie Ray Harper claims she received seem minor, easily self-inflicted.
What was unusual about that, she was able to describe each and every mark on her body. She would point out this scratch, this mark, that mark, which the police thought was unusual for someone in such a traumatic situation to be thinking about her own injuries.
And though she said she never saw Joel after the attack, some of his blood was on her T-shirt.
I noticed blood on your shirt. Is that yours?
You know how you got it?
I don't.
She had 3 spots on her T-shirt that she had on that does have Joel's blood. She cannot explain that.
She's not doing this every day. I know, right? Blood on her shirt.
Investigators find Julie Harper's story unbelievable. For her account to be true, they'd have to accept the possibility that an intruder somehow got into the locked house without leaving any sign of a break-in.
He went directly to the boy's room, stabbed him for some unknown reason, and then left no trail of blood throughout the house.
No blood trail, no definitive clue that he had ever been there.
She's the one who had access and opportunity, and for some strange reason, couldn't explain why a complete stranger would go to her boy's bedroom, kill him for no reason, and let her live. So her story just didn't make sense.
Julie's own words are also damning.
Before anything was known at the crime scene, she asked, did they find the knife? Which was very suspicious because, according to her, she knew nothing about a knife or a stabbing. She didn't even see Joel. And so she asked the question, did they find the knife? There would be no way for her to ask that question unless she knew what happened.
There was no intruder. There was no break-in.
It seems as if every piece of evidence leads directly to Julie Ray Harper. Once she decides to kill her son, they believe she takes a knife from the kitchen, then walks down the hall to Joel's bedroom. There, she stabs him through the covers while he sleeps. He awakes under attack and fights back as best he can. But a 10-year-old child is no match for a 28-year-old woman, especially one bent on an unfathomably cruel murder.
She's the one with opportunity and perhaps motive, but some reason, and she did it.
Whatever her motive, investigators believe that after stabbing Joel to death, Julie arranged the house to look like an intruder had broken in. First, she placed the bloody knife in the hall.
Her own knife, no forced entry, no blood trail, a staged crime scene.
Next, she smashed the glass door leading into the garage. And finally, to make it look good, she gave herself a black eye and other small injuries.
All the evidence points to her. No one else could have done it from what we found.
She, of course, was just incredulous and was crying and wondering why in the world anybody would think she would kill her own son.
Her family and friends don't believe it for a second. Julie Harper could not possibly have murdered her own son.
I never doubted Julie from day one. Julie has never demonstrated anything other than truthfulness and honesty in her life. And I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one. You ask all her friends, they'll tell you the same thing.
Julie is arrested and charged with the murder of her son, Joel.
Maybe he was a bother. Maybe he was in the way. I don't know.
At her trial, Julie Ray Harper's ex-husband insists she's hardly a perfect mother. He says Julie didn't want Joel right from the beginning.
He was the star witness in the trial. When asked by Ed Parkinson, what was Julie's reaction when she learned that she was pregnant with Joel? The ex-husband testifies, well, she immediately wanted to go out and have an abortion.
The prosecution also cites the number 13 as a significant clue in the case. They claim Joel was killed on October 13th because Julie Harper has some bizarre fascination with the number 13. She was born on the 13th of the month and insisted on being married on a day that fell on the 13th.
Which happened to be a Wednesday, which is a strange day to be married when people had to travel from all over. She gave birth to Joel on July the 13th after drinking some concoction on the 12th to make her induce labor. She killed him on the 13th of October, and he was 10 years and 3 months old at the time.
Joel even had 13 stab wounds. To a jury in a conservative county in Illinois, it's proof of an evil way of thinking. The perfect mindset for murder. After 2 weeks of trial, Julie Ray Harper is found guilty of murdering her son.
Julie Ray Harper was convicted of first-degree murder. She was sentenced, I believe, to 65 years in prison.
I have a lot of support. I have a lot of people who know me and love me.
Prosecutors are certain they've put a killer behind bars, but Julie's family and friends are equally sure a terrible injustice has been done, not only to Julie and Joel, but to others. His killer is still out there, free to kill again.
Pretty high score.
Then, an unexpected twist of fate suddenly reveals they could be right. Julie Ray Harper has been convicted of murdering her son, Joel, but swears she is innocent. She continues to insist he was killed by a masked stranger.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie and say I did something I didn't, and I most certainly am not gonna disrespect the integrity of Joel's life and my life and what we are and who we are.
If she's telling the truth, she is facing a mother's worst nightmare.
Joel was her life. She would have laid down her life to have protected him, let alone harmed him in any way.
Not only has she lost her only child, she has lost her freedom, sentenced to 65 years in prison.
Julie was just wondering why. Why in the world would this happen? Why could this happen to an innocent person?
Media attention on the case soon attracts a group asking that same question, the Illinois Innocence Project.
We investigate cases of wrongful conviction. The primary aim is to work on cases where there may be claims of actual innocence.
It doesn't take long for them to discover Julie Ray Harper's claims might be legitimate.
When they looked at the facts of the case, they were astounded that Julie was convicted and was in prison.
Innocence Project investigators quickly dig up leads the original investigators didn't believe were connected.
The very next day, there was a witness who came to the sheriff. He tries to approach the sheriff. The sheriff says, Not now, I'm busy. I've got a murder case I'm working on. Well, Sheriff, I think I've seen your suspect.
Alan Berkshire tells the sheriff he was having dinner at the local diner with his wife and 11-year-old son, Rusty, when a scruffy stranger came in.
I had never seen him before. He definitely was not from around Lawrenceville.
It is 2 nights before Joel Kirkpatrick's murder. In just 48 hours, Joel will be stabbed to death.
And this drifter comes in and starts a conversation with his son, Rusty.
Pretty high score.
The stranger strongly resembled the description Julie Ray Harper would give of her attacker.
He was probably 5'9", 5'10". He was maybe 155, 150 pounds, slender build for his height, and had brown hair, and it was not really kept real good. It was wind blowing, dirty looking and stuff.
I bet you're a good little boy.
And Rusty ignored him. Then this individual took his hand and put it on Rusty's shoulder. I didn't like that.
Bet you're afraid of me.
I purposely moved myself where I could look directly at him. And I was glaring at him at this point.
And then he says, in this devious, deep voice, well, you know, maybe you should be afraid of me.
Maybe everybody should be afraid of me. Maybe even terrified of me.
The moment Berkshire hears about Joel's murder, he thinks of the stranger who approached his son.
His whole persona, his personality and stuff was so unique, and there was what seemed to be an underlying violent streak or hate or something in him. And so, not being from the area, I just thought, possibly this drifter coming through has murdered this boy.
I'm telling you, Detective, this guy was weird.
Berkshire immediately tells police about his suspicion, but Lawrenceville investigators doubt it's connected to Joel's murder.
To the best of my knowledge, no one has ever tried in the law enforcement, has even made any attempt whatsoever to try to find out who this individual was, or even if there was any kind of connection.
Not our suspect, but we'll look into this.
I think you really should.
All right, thank you.
He claims that the police ignored that, and they did not. They just didn't put much stock in Mr. Berkshire's account of what he said he saw.
Innocence Project investigators get another lead from a ticket agent at a bus station less than 40 miles from Lawrenceville.
A guy matching the description that's being broadcast on the television comes into the bus station at around noon to buy a bus ticket to Winnemucca, Nevada.
She had never sold a bus ticket to anyone ever before from Winnemucca, Nevada.
Winnemucca is a very small town in Nevada. Being asked to sell a ticket there struck the agent as unusual.
Just one ticket to Winnemucca, Nevada. I need to leave today. It's real important.
The man is nervous and jumpy. Behaving so strangely, he scares her.
He gives some story about his mother's ill and he needs to visit her and he doesn't have enough money for the ticket.
This is all the money I have.
Just to get rid of him, she gives him the ticket.
Have a safe trip.
Soon after, she makes a startling connection to the man and the murder of Joel Kirkpatrick.
She saw the sketch that Julie had made with the sketch artist of the intruder. And she called the police and she said, I sold a bus ticket to that man.
He looks exactly like the sketch that I just saw.
Investigators don't consider the tip relevant.
They took her statement from the beginning and they didn't think anything of it as far as a suspect goes.
Though the original investigators claimed Julie Harper's injuries were self-inflicted, Innocence Project investigators discovered that the emergency room doctor who treated her that night was certain they were real.
They never talked to the emergency room doctor, who was in emergency room medicine for decades. And he said, in his opinion, that there was no way that these were self-inflicted wounds, that these wounds were inflicted by a third person.
She had a black eye, that had she gone to law enforcement in a domestic dispute, the husband would have been arrested based on that evidence.
The rug burns on her knees, they established, were from being dragged down the hall.
They photographed her knee where she actually had rug burns. And the nurse in the nursing notes noted she had rug burns.
All of these, every one of these wounds were something that the emergency room doctor said were not something that somebody would self-inflict.
The prosecution also contends that there was no forensic evidence of an intruder. Innocence Project investigators believe that's because they didn't collect any.
Did they fingerprint the wood block or the counter where the knife was missing or the kitchen drawers? They did not. Did they fingerprint Joel's room where the intruder came into? They did not fingerprint. Did they take fibers from Joel's bedsheet? They did not. Why not?
And the police officer who found no footprints in the dewy grass? Meteorological evidence shows that there was no dew that morning.
There was rain expected, and apparently every farmer knows when you're expecting rain, there's no dew.
Innocence Project investigators raise enough questions that a national television show does a story on the case.
And it was an interesting, balanced show. It wasn't innocent woman railroaded. It was, isn't this bizarre? A mother with no motive, where the physical evidence doesn't quite line up, was still convicted. How is this happening?
The night the TV show airs, crime writer Diane Fanning happens to be watching. When she sees an interview with prosecutor Ed Parkinson, she is certain something is very wrong.
From what he said, I was convinced this woman probably did not commit that crime.
In fact, Diane Fanning is about to stumble onto something that will blow the case wide open. Julie Ray Harper is serving what amounts to a life sentence for the murder of her son, but firmly insists she is innocent. When a crime writer in Texas sees a television interview with prosecutor Ed Parkinson, she suspects Julie Ray Harper is telling the truth. She's serving time for someone else's crime.
The more I listened to this prosecutor speak about his conviction of Julie's guilt, the more I was certain she wasn't guilty.
Joel's murder is eerily like those committed by a man Fanning is writing a book about, Tommy Lynn Sells, a serial murderer on death row in Texas.
Diane Fanning writes a letter to Tommy Lynn Sells, and all she says is, I was watching a show and a prosecutor said no one breaks into a house for no reason to kill a kid and forgets to bring a knife. We know that's not true, don't we?
When Tommy Lynn Sells writes her back, his answers are shocking.
I got a letter back from him. He was sitting on death row at the time, which meant he had no access to television, so he couldn't have seen the show I'd seen. And he said, did that murder maybe happen a couple of days before the murder I committed in Springfield, Missouri? Did it maybe happen on the 13th of the month?
The letter is unnerving. Could Tommy Lynn Sells be responsible for killing Joel Kirkpatrick? How else could he know the exact date the murder occurred? To Diane Fanning, it sounds like Sells is confessing.
I was stunned.
But is it true?
Tommy Lynn Sells is a prolific serial killer who spent nearly 2 decades going cross-country committing murder. He was never suspected in a single one of the crimes until he was caught in Del Rio, Texas, for a crime he committed on December 31st, 1999.
The Del Rio murder is what puts Tommy Lynn Sells on death row. It's also the primary reason Diane Fanning believes Sells could be responsible for the murder of Joel Kirkpatrick. In Del Rio, Tommy Lynn Sells sneaks into a mobile home around 4 a.m. and stabs 2 young girls while their parents sleep in the next room. Middle of the night, helpless victims, parents asleep close by. It all sounds chillingly familiar. It's almost exactly like the attack on Joel Kirkpatrick. Mom! But in Del Rio, one girl survives to identify Tommy Lynn Sells. The ID leads to his arrest only a day later.
Following Sells' arrest in Del Rio, it was just a matter of a few short hours where Sells basically said, I guess y'all want to know about the other homicides.
Texas Ranger John Allen suddenly has a full-time assignment. investigating Tommy Lynn Sells. Sells confesses to murdering dozens of people all over the country, and his claims begin to check out.
We're pretty confident that Sells has committed 21 that we've confirmed.
Is the murder of Joel Kirkpatrick one more on the list?
He said, there's a lot of people sitting in jail for murders that I committed, and this is just another one of them.
I can say that Sells is very capable of committing a murder as such. He's very capable of entering a residence, using a knife from that residence. He's done that numerous times before.
Most serial killers have a favorite MO. They target the same kind of victim and use the same technique and weapon for all attacks. Not Tommy Lynn Sells. His MO is anything and everything.
He has that. Tommy Lynn Sells is basically in a category all of himself. In the murders that Tommy had been connected to, he has absolutely no pattern to what he does, capable of using any weapon.
In some cases, he'd use a baseball bat, he'd use a knife, he'd use his bare hands, he'd use a gun, whatever presented itself to him, and he would kill just because he wanted to. He killed women, he killed children, he killed men. He didn't care. He killed them all.
When Diane Fanning tells Ranger Allen about Sells' letter, Allen checks a timeline he has put together on Sells' whereabouts over the years. It's a timeline culled from data from NCIC, the National Crime Information Center.
For instance, if I was shown being ran through NCIC from Oklahoma Highway Patrol, I mean, I would have to be at that location. They obviously had to have their hands on that person at that particular time.
Was Tommy Lynn Sells in Lawrenceville at the time of Joel's murder? They check.
We have him in the area. There's no doubt about that. He was ran 3 times by the Missouri State Police in that same time frame.
In fact, just 2 days after Joel is murdered, Sells commits another similar murder 350 miles away, this time a young girl.
There was a murder that happened October 15th of 1997 in Springfield, Missouri. We know for a fact that Sells committed this murder of Stephanie Mahaney.
But when Texas Ranger John Allen contacts Illinois investigators about the murder of Joel Kirkpatrick, they aren't interested in Tommy Lynn Sells.
They just weren't too receptive of the phone call simply because they obviously had a woman arrested and convicted and in the penitentiary for Joel's homicide at that time.
Diane Fanning says Illinois investigators are also not interested in what she tells them.
The new information that I provided in Julie Ray Harper's case was treated with total scorn by the investigators. I was treated like some sort of serial killer groupie and not taken seriously at all.
But Diane Fanning still has one potent weapon at her command, the book she's writing about Tommy Lynn Sells.
If he was telling me the truth and I put it in my book, then somebody who knew more than me could take that information and do something about it.
When the book comes out, it's a bombshell. For the very first time, Julie Ray Harper and her supporters hear about Tommy Lynn Sells.
We immediately started burning up the phone lines. Hey, have you heard this? Have you heard this? I didn't know anything about this.
Is this the smoking gun they've been hoping for? The key to proving Julie Harper's innocence?
I felt that with this discovery, that there's no reason she should be confined in a prison cell 1 minute more, let alone a day or weeks or another year.
Did Illinois prosecutors try the right person for killing Joel Kirkpatrick?
We love you, Julie!
Julie Harper supporters say no, and they want a new trial. They want another jury to hear the latest evidence and decide, is Joel's murderer his own mother or a convicted serial killer? Though Julie Ray Harper is in prison for murdering her son, Tommy Lynn Sells, a convicted serial killer on death row in Texas, has all but confessed that he is the real killer. He has been known to commit similar crimes. He matches the description Julie Ray Harper gave of the killer.
He was dark hair and white.
And he was in the area at the time. To prosecutors, the Tommy Lynn Sells theory is interesting, but they don't buy it.
Well, because I don't believe in fairy tales.
Prosecutors believe Tommy Lynn Sells is confessing to crimes he didn't commit. For a car ride and a pizza, he'll say anything.
He's got nothing better to do. Well, after all, he lives in a state where they really do carry out the death penalty, so the longer he makes up things, I guess he gets to live.
From day one, they took the position that Tommy Lynn Sells was a serial confessor. That was Ed Parkinson's quote from day one.
Prosecutors think somebody told Sells details of the murder that he's pawning off as his own recollections.
I don't think, I know. He got the details from someone. Don't forget, Julie had her own website throughout this ordeal from the beginning. Anybody could have accessed that.
Not Tommy Lynn Sells, though. Innocence Project investigators say that on death row, he has no access to the internet or TV. But that's not all. As they continue digging, they find another key piece of evidence.
Sells actually got arrested on a traffic ticket in St. Louis, and he posted his driver's license, which remains in the courthouse today.
The license was confiscated during the traffic stop and kept because Sells never appeared for his court date. But what stuns investigators, the photo of Tommy Lynn Sells looks very much like the intruder Julie Ray Harper described to police the night of the murder.
Maybe he could have been a teenager, I don't know.
It's really the best evidence of her description being accurate, because there he is. You can see for yourself. It's dead on.
Investigators show the license photo to Alan Berkshire, the man who reported seeing a stranger in a local diner. He immediately recognizes Sells as the man he saw that night.
I am about 90% certain that the person that I encountered in the Lawrenceville diner is Tommy Lynn Sells.
Tommy Lynn Sells' past history, his virtual confession, Julie Ray Harper's description of her attacker, the driver's license photo, Alan Berkshire's eyewitness testimony, the Texas Rangers timeline. To Innocence Project investigators, it all adds up to one stunning reality. Tommy Lynn Sells murdered Joel Kirkpatrick.
I think, to a jury, the most important thing that Tommy Lynn Sells brought to this case is that he answers the question of who would do something like this? Who would break in a house, use a weapon from the person's house, and murder a child? He answers that question. He's right there.
This crime fits Sells' MO to a T. The overall picture that he paints in his confession is right on the money. It's exactly how this crime occurred.
Armed with new evidence, Julie Ray Harper's defense attorneys go back to court, hoping to get a new trial. They get one. They can now piece together a complete account of Joel's murder. Tommy Lynn Sells stops at the local diner where he encounters Alan Berkshire and his son. Sells stays around town. 2 nights later, he sees Julie in Joel's house and decides to strike.
Everybody was most relaxed, asleep, at ease, feeling safe. That's when he violated the sanctity of their homes.
Around 4 a.m., Sells sneaks quietly into the kitchen. There, he picks up a knife, then walks down the hall. He finds Joel's bedroom and stabs him. Julie Harper is awakened by screams.
Tommy Lynn Sells stabbed Joel to death, pushed him off of the bed to exactly the place where Joel's body was found, came back out and banged into Julie.
Julie grabs hold of him and is dragged down the hall.
He broke away from her. He got into the back door in the garage. He couldn't open that door.
He crashes through the door, breaks the glass.
Julie grabs him again, desperate not to let him get away. Sells turns on Julie and makes his getaway.
Once he started describing what happened inside the house, it was uncanny how it comported with both the physical evidence and exactly what Julie had said.
Sells shows up at a bus station less than 40 miles away and leaves another telling clue.
One ticket to Winnemucca, Nevada.
Who is from Winnemucca? Who do police records show has been arrested more than once in Winnemucca, Nevada, a town that nobody's ever heard of? Tommy Lynn Sells.
Once again, a jury debates whether Julie Ray Harper killed her only son. This time, the verdict is not guilty.
When they said not guilty, Julie let out a little scream and collapsed to the floor.
Despite the verdict of not guilty, the prosecution maintains Julie Ray Harper did indeed kill her own son.
She got away with murder. We'll never know why she did it. I'll be convinced that she did it because the evidence, in my opinion, the evidence showed it. One jury got it right and one got it wrong.
We are tremendously gratified by the result. This has been a nightmare that nobody should have to live through.
Julie Harper's family and friends are happy she's out of prison, but they are still dealing with a terrible loss.
The grieving isn't over. You know, it masks, it totally overshadows the fact that a tragedy occurred. A young boy with so much potential was murdered. It's like bittersweet victory.
That's the news. A manhunt is underway in Halifax County. Authorities are looking for a Jamasia Tillery. Officers say he's accused of shooting and killing the mother of his child, Montasia Arrington. Just 2 weeks prior, Tillery was charged with stabbing her and then released on bond. In a story you'll only see on WRAL, Keenan Willer talks with Arrington's family and the judge who gave Tillery bond after the first assault. At 7 a.m. on April 19, 2022, emergency dispatchers in Littleton, North Carolina, received a frantic call that would expose one of the most devastating failures in domestic violence protection. Gunshots had erupted at an apartment on Little Drive, shattering the morning quiet and leaving neighbors in terror. When police arrived at the scene, they discovered 20-year-old Montasia Renee Arrington lying motionless, her body riddled with bullets. Her mother, Teresa, had been shot in the hip while desperately trying to shield her daughter from the gunman. Most heartbreaking of all, Montasia's 1-year-old son Jason was present during the attack, witnessing the destruction of his family. Welcome back to Shadows of Crime, where we expose the darkest corners of human nature and the systems that fail to protect the innocent. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our community as we seek justice for victims whose voices have been silenced. The man responsible for this massacre was Jamasia Tillery, Montasia's ex-boyfriend and the father of little Jason. But here's what makes this case absolutely infuriating. Just 2 weeks earlier, Tillery had been arrested for a vicious knife attack on Montasia. He had beaten her face until her eye swelled shut, then grabbed a kitchen knife and slashed her hands as she fought for her life. Montasia had begged the court to keep him locked up. She stood before a judge pleading for protection, warning that her life was in danger. She knew what Tillery was capable of because she had already survived his violence once. Yet somehow, despite her desperate pleas and despite Tillery's history as a registered sex offender, the system made a decision that would seal Montasia's fate. A decision so shocking that even the judge would later admit his regret. But what exactly happened in that courtroom? How did a man who had just tried to kill the mother of his child walk free in a matter of hours? And what warning signs did everyone miss that could have saved Montasia's life? The answers will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about justice in America. Montasia Renee Arrington was just 20 years old when her world revolved around one precious thing: her son Jason. Born and raised in Halifax County, North Carolina, Montasia was described by her grandmother Brenda Royster as having a gentle and caring nature that drew people to her. She was the kind of young woman who put family first, especially when it came to her baby boy. In early 2022, Montasia was living in the Fairfield Apartments complex in Roanoke Rapids, trying to build a stable life for herself and Jason. The toddler, barely 1 year old, was her everything. Every decision she made centered around creating a safe environment where he could grow and thrive. When circumstances required it, she moved in with her mother, Teresa Arrington, in Littleton, seeking the support and security that only family could provide. But Montasia's life was complicated by a relationship that had turned toxic. Jamaziah Tillery, Jason's father, was 22 years old and carried baggage that would terrify any parent. In April 2017, when Tillery was just 16, he had been convicted of felonious restraint and sexual battery against a 14-year-old victim. The crimes occurred in January 2016, resulting in a 30-month probation sentence and mandatory registration as a sex offender for a minimum of 10 years. Despite this disturbing history, Montasia had once believed in the possibility of redemption. Like many young mothers, she hoped that fatherhood might change Tillery, that he could become the man their son deserved. By early 2022, however, their romantic relationship had crumbled. The couple was no longer together. Though Montasia still allowed Tillery occasional visits to see Jason, this arrangement worried Montasia's family deeply. Her grandmother Brenda Royster had witnessed Tillery's possessive and jealous behavior firsthand. The family could see the warning signs that Montasia, perhaps blinded by hope for her son's sake, was trying to ignore. They watched nervously as she attempted to balance co-parenting with a man whose violent tendencies were becoming increasingly apparent. The dynamic between Montasia and Tillery was a powder keg waiting to explode. She was a devoted mother trying to do right by her child, while he was a registered sex offender whose jealousy and control issues were escalating. Montasia's attempts to maintain boundaries while allowing Tillery access to their son created a dangerous situation that her family feared would end badly. Their worst nightmares were about to become reality. April 2, 2022 started like any other day for Montasia. She was at her Roanoke Rapids apartment when Tillery arrived for what seemed like a routine visit with their son Jason. These visits had become part of their co-parenting arrangement, and despite her family's concerns, Montasia continued to allow them because she believed every child deserved a relationship with their father. What happened next would shatter that belief forever. During the visit, Tillery asked to use Montasia's phone to call his sister. It was a simple request that she granted without hesitation. But when Montasia later tried to retrieve her phone, something inside Tillery snapped. His jealousy and paranoia, which had been building for months, exploded into accusations that would change everything. Tillery accused Montasia of cheating on him. Despite the fact that they were no longer together as a couple, his possessive nature couldn't accept that she might have moved on with her life. The accusation hung in the air like a lit fuse. And what followed was a level of violence that would leave even seasoned police officers shaken. According to Officer N. Powell of the Roanoke Rapids Police Department, Tillery began beating Montasia in the face with his fists. These weren't the slaps of an angry ex-boyfriend. These were the calculated blows of someone intent on causing serious harm. Montasia's face swelled from the repeated impacts, and her eye was beaten so severely that it swelled completely shut. But Tillery wasn't finished. As Montasia reeled from the facial assault, he walked to the kitchen and grabbed a knife. The sight of the blade must have sent terror through her as she realized this wasn't just about jealousy anymore. This was about control, domination, and potentially her life. In the domestic violence protective order she would later file, Montasia described the horror in her own words. Then he began punching me like a man and gets a kitchen knife. Those simple words carry the weight of absolute terror. A young mother, beaten and bloodied, watching her child's father transform into someone capable of murder, Tillery used the knife to cut Montasia's hands as she desperately tried to defend herself. The police report documented that he restrained her with a weapon for the purpose of doing seriously bodily harm. Every slice across her palms and fingers was evidence of her fight to survive, to get back to her son who needed his mother. In addition to the physical violence, Tillery destroyed Montasia's phone, causing $200 in damage and cutting off her ability to call for help. But somehow, through sheer determination and perhaps divine intervention, Montasia managed to escape the apartment and reach safety. She immediately called police, and Tillery fled the scene. But his freedom was short-lived. Roanoke Rapids police quickly apprehended him, and the evidence of his brutality was written across Montasia's battered face and slashed hands. The attack was over, but the real fight for Montasia's life was just beginning. Following the April 2nd attack, Tillery faced a mountain of serious charges: assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill, inflicting serious injury, assault on a female, communicating threats, kidnapping, and damage to property. Due to the domestic nature of the case, he was initially held without bond for 48 hours, giving Montasia a brief moment to breathe and plan her next steps. On April 4th, Montasia made what would be the most important court appearance of her life. Standing before the judge, still bearing the physical evidence of Tillery's violence, she made a desperate plea that should have saved her life. She specifically requested that Tillery be denied bond, telling the court that she feared for her safety. This wasn't a casual concern or an overreaction. This was a young mother who had looked into the eyes of someone capable of killing her and recognized the danger. But on April 5th, Judge W. Turner Stevenson made a decision that would haunt him forever. Despite Montasia's explicit fears and her request for protection, he set Tillery's bond at $40,000 with the condition that he have no contact with Montasia. The judge believed this amount would be sufficient to keep Tillery behind bars. He was catastrophically wrong. Tillery posted the required $4,000, just 10% of the bond amount, through Palmetto Surety Corporation. In a matter of hours, the man who had beaten Montasia's face beyond recognition and held a knife to her throat walked out of the detention center shortly before 5:45 p.m. that same day. The system had failed Montasia in the most fundamental way possible. When later questioned about this decision, Judge Stevenson would reveal the flawed thinking that cost Montasia her life. Until an appearance before a judge, he was really not charged with anything that he would have gotten no bond. We would have a jail with thousands of people in it if all the domestic cases stayed no bond. Judge Stevenson said at the time he believed $40,000 was going to be enough to keep Tillery in jail. I mean, in hindsight, sure, I would like to go back and he have no bond and still be in jail today, but I don't get the luxury of knowing what we know now when I'm set the bond. But Arrington's family says it was plain to see that Tillery posed a threat, and they feel the justice system failed her. He was really not charged with anything that he would have gotten no bond. We would have a jail with thousands of people in it if all the domestic cases stayed no bond. The judge added that he believed $40,000 would keep Tillery locked up, admitting, in hindsight, sure, I would like to go back and he have no bond and still be in jail today, but I don't get the luxury of knowing what we know now when I'm setting a bond. But here's what's truly heartbreaking. The judge did have crucial information. He knew about Tillery's history as a registered sex offender. He knew about the knife attack. He knew Montasia was terrified. Yet somehow none of that was enough. What are the domestic violence laws like in your state or country? Have you seen cases where victims' pleas for protection were ignored? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences might help other viewers recognize warning signs in their own community. Montasia's grandmother, Brenda Royster, captured the family's devastation perfectly. We were under the impression that he wasn't getting a bond and that he was going to be locked up. This mama had a baby. She's got a little boy that will never know his mom. She wanted somebody to protect her, and we couldn't protect her. We couldn't protect her, and then she went to the people that are supposed to do the protecting, and they couldn't protect her. Wanted somebody to protect her, and we couldn't protect her. We couldn't protect her. And then she went to the people that are supposed to do the protect, and they couldn't protect her. With Tillery back on the streets, Montasia knew she had to take every precaution to protect herself and little Jason. She made the decision to leave her Roanoke Rapids apartment and move in with her mother, Teresa Arrington, in Littleton. It seemed like the smart choice. Having family around would provide an extra layer of security, and Teresa could help watch Jason while Montasia tried to rebuild her sense of safety. For those 2 weeks, Montasia attempted to create some normalcy in her life. She was surrounded by family who loved her, and the no-contact order gave her a legal shield that should have kept Tillery away. The days passed without incident, and perhaps Montasia began to believe that the worst was behind her. Maybe the court order would actually work. Maybe Tillery would respect the boundaries and stay away. This false sense of security is one of the most dangerous aspects of domestic violence cases. Victims often experience a brief calm period after legal intervention, leading them to believe they're finally safe. But for perpetrators like Tillery, this time isn't spent reflecting or moving on, it's spent planning. While Montasia was trying to heal from her physical and emotional wounds, Tillery was violating the very foundation of his release conditions. The no-contact order that was supposed to protect her meant nothing to him. He was watching, waiting, and preparing for what would become his final active control over the woman who had dared to seek help. The court system had given Tillery exactly what he needed: freedom to move around, time to plan, and access to the tools he would use to ensure Montasia could never escape him again. Every day that passed brought him closer to a decision that would destroy multiple lives forever. As April 19th dawned, Montasia had no idea that her 2 weeks of relative peace were about to end in the most horrific way possible. She couldn't have known that Tillery had already made his choice, that he had decided, if he couldn't have her, no one could. At 7 a.m. that Tuesday morning, as Littleton began to wake up to what seemed like another ordinary day, Tillery was already moving toward the apartment on Little Drive where Montasia felt safe with her mother. What happened next would prove that sometimes the most dangerous time for a domestic violence victim isn't during the relationship, it's after they've tried to leave. At 7 a.m. on Tuesday, April 19, 2022, the quiet morning calm of Little Drive off Ferguson Street in Littleton was shattered by the sound that every domestic violence victim fears most: their abuser at the door. Tillery had found Montasia at her mother's apartment, violating the no-contact order that was supposed to keep her safe. What transpired inside that apartment represents every mother's worst nightmare and every family's greatest fear. The exact details of how Tillery gained entry remain unclear, but what followed was a massacre that would leave one young mother dead and a family destroyed forever. Teresa Arrington, Montasia's mother, found herself face to face with a man who had come to kill her daughter. In that moment, maternal instinct took over. Teresa didn't hesitate. She threw herself between Tillery and Montasia, becoming a human shield in a desperate attempt to save her child's life. The gunshots that followed echoed through the apartment complex, sending neighbors scrambling for cover and reaching for their phones to call 911. But inside that apartment, a mother was fighting for her daughter's life with everything she had. Teresa was shot in the hip during her heroic attempt to protect Montasia. According to Montasia's grandmother, Brenda Royster, her mother got shot trying to save Montasia. She pushed Montasia out of the way and told her to run. Even wounded, Teresa continued fighting, continued trying to give her daughter a chance to escape. But Tillery wasn't finished. The violence that had started inside the apartment spilled outside, where more gunshots rang out. Montasia was shot multiple times, both inside and outside the building. Each bullet was a deliberate choice, a calculated decision to end the life of a young woman whose only crime was trying to protect herself and her child. The most heartbreaking detail of this entire tragedy is that little Jay's son, barely 1 year old, was present during the shooting. This innocent child witnessed the destruction of his family, the murder of his mother, and the wounding of his grandmother. Miraculously, Jay's son was physically unharmed, but the psychological trauma of that morning will follow him for the rest of his life. When police arrived at the scene, they found Montasia's lifeless body. The young woman who had begged the court for protection, who had moved in with her mother for safety, who had done everything right in trying to escape an abusive relationship, was dead at just 20 years old. Teresa Arrington survived her gunshot wound and was later released from medical care, but she would carry the trauma of being unable to save her daughter forever. Brenda Royster's words capture the devastating reality of what Tillery had stolen. "This mama had a baby, she's got a little boy that will never know his mom." Those words hit like a punch to the gut. A 1-year-old boy would grow up without his mother's voice singing him to sleep, without her arms to comfort him when he was scared, without her guidance as he navigated life's challenges. Tillery hadn't just killed Montasia. He had orphaned his own son. After executing Montasia in cold blood, Tillery fled the scene like the coward he had always been. The man who could beat a woman's face beyond recognition and shoot an unarmed mother multiple times suddenly found his courage failing when it came time to face the consequences of his actions. Littleton Police Chief Philip Trevette immediately issued warrants for Tillery's arrest on multiple charges: felony murder, assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill, firing into an occupied dwelling, and possession of a firearm by a felon. The severity of these charges reflected the calculated brutality of his attack on Montasia and Teresa, but Tillery had vanished, triggering a multi-agency manhunt that would span 3 agonizing days. The United States Marshals Service Fugitive Task Force joined the search, recognizing that Tillery posed an ongoing threat to public safety. He was considered armed and extremely dangerous, a man who had already proven he was willing to kill to maintain control. For 72 hours, law enforcement followed leads and tips about Tillery's whereabouts. Every hour he remained free was another hour of terror for anyone who might cross his path. The community lived in fear, knowing that a murderer was on the loose, possibly planning his next act of violence. Tillery had fled to Raleigh, North Carolina, seeking refuge among friends and family who lived there. Perhaps he thought the distance would buy him time, or maybe he believed his connections could help him escape justice. He was wrong on both counts. On Friday, April 22, 2022 at approximately 4:30 p.m., the manhunt came to an end. The U.S. Marshals, working alongside the Raleigh Police Department tactical team, located Tillery and moved in for the arrest. There was no dramatic shootout, no final stand, just a pathetic man being dragged away to face the consequences of his actions. Following his capture, authorities conducted thorough searches at the residence where Tillery had been hiding, gathering additional evidence that would be used to build an airtight case against him. Officials say they found Tillery in Raleigh after following several tips. The chief also tells me they found a weapon believed to be the same weapon Tillery used to fatally shoot the mother of his child. Tonight, a felon wanted for murder is no longer on the run. 22-year-old Jamazia Tillery shot and killed Montasia Arrington, the mother of his child, on Tuesday. Arrington's mother, Teresa Arrington, was also wounded trying to save her daughter. She was treated for non-life-threatening injuries. At some point, Tillery posted to Facebook apologizing to his son and the mother of his child for what he had done. Today, U.S. Marshals arrested Tillery thanks to tips from the Roanoke Police Department and the Halifax County Sheriff's Office. He was initially booked into the Wake County Detention Center, where he would await trial for the murder of the mother of his child. The charges against Tillery painted a picture of premeditated violence, felony murder for Montasia's death, assault with a deadly weapon for shooting Teresa, firing into an occupied dwelling for the attack on the apartment, and possession of a firearm by a felon due to his previous convictions. Have you seen similar cases in your area where domestic violence escalated to murder? What resources are available in your community for victims trying to escape abusive relationships? Share your thoughts and local resources in the comments. Your information could help save someone's life. Justice had finally caught up with Jamazia Tillery, but it came too late for Montasia Renee Arrington. The tragic outcome of this case is not the result of a single misstep, but rather a cascade of systemic failures that expose deep flaws in the justice system's handling of domestic violence. At the heart of what went wrong was the Bond decision, which prioritized procedural norms and the presumption of innocence over the urgent need to protect a vulnerable victim. Despite clear evidence of escalating threats and a documented history of abuse, the court granted bond to the accused, underestimating the risk he posed. This decision was not made in a vacuum. It reflected a broader judicial culture that often fails to fully grasp the dynamics of domestic violence, where abusers can be most dangerous when they sense a loss of control. Impounding the flawed bond decision was a glaring lack of monitoring. Once released, the accused was subject to minimal oversight, with no meaningful mechanisms in place to ensure compliance with protective orders or to track his movements. The absence of electronic monitoring or regular check-ins meant that the victim was left exposed, relying on a piece of paper for protection against someone who had already demonstrated a willingness to ignore legal boundary. This lack of proactive intervention is emblematic of a justice system that too often treats domestic violence as a private matter, rather than a public safety crisis. Inadequate protection for the victim was the final fatal link in this chain of failures. Despite her repeated pleas for help and clear indications of imminent danger, the system's response was fragmented and insufficient. Law enforcement, courts, and social services operated in silos, with little coordination or urgency. The victim's voice was not only marginalized but in effect silenced by bureaucratic inertia and a lack of belief in the seriousness of her situation. This failure to believe and act decisively on behalf of victims is a recurring theme in domestic violence cases, with deadly consequences. This case is not an isolated incident, but a reflection of the broader domestic violence crisis that continues to claim lives across the country. Every year, thousands of victims are failed by the very institutions meant to protect them. The justice system's reliance on outdated procedures, insufficient risk assessment tools, and a lack of trauma-informed practices perpetuates a cycle where abusers are given the benefit of the doubt, while victims are left to navigate danger alone. The statistics are sobering. Intimate partner violence accounts for a significant proportion of homicides, and the period immediately following separation is the most lethal for victims. Yet, systemic change has been slow, hampered by stigma, underfunding, and a persistent reluctance to challenge entrenched legal norms. To address these failures, the justice system must undergo fundamental changes. Risk assessment protocols need to be standardized and rigorously applied, ensuring that decisions about bond and release are informed by the realities of domestic violence. Courts should implement mandatory training for judges and prosecutors on the dynamics of abuse, and invest in technology such as electronic monitoring to enforce protective orders. Most importantly, there must be a cultural shift toward believing victims, taking their fears seriously, acting swiftly, and prioritizing their safety above procedural convenience. The thematic message emerging from this tragedy is clear. Believing victims is not just a moral imperative but a matter of life and death. Judicial failures to recognize and respond to the warning signs of domestic violence have deadly consequences. The justice system must move beyond passive acknowledgement and embrace a proactive, victim-centered approach. Only then can we hope to prevent future tragedies and honor the lives lost to systemic neglect. Montasia Renee Arrington was more than just a statistic in domestic violence records or a name in a police report. She was a young woman with dreams, aspirations, and an unwavering love for her son. At just 20 years old, she had already shown remarkable courage in seeking help, filing protective orders, and trying to build a safe life for herself and Jason. Her memory deserves to be honored not as a victim who failed to escape, but as a survivor who fought against impossible odds in a system that failed her. Montasia's story serves as an urgent reminder that domestic violence can happen to anyone, anywhere. The warning signs are often there: escalating control, threats, violations of boundaries, and a pattern of violence that intensifies over time. As a community, we must learn to recognize these signs and support victims without judgment. We must believe them when they tell us they're in danger, help them access resources, and advocate for systemic changes that prioritize their safety. Let Montasia's legacy be one of awareness and action. Let her story inspire us to demand better from our justice system, to support domestic violence organizations in our communities, and to never turn away when someone reaches out for help. Montasia Renea Arrington was a daughter, a mother, and a young woman who deserved to live. Her life mattered, her dreams mattered, and her story matters. May she rest in peace, and may her memory drive us to protect others who find themselves in similar danger. If this story moved you, please like this video, share it to raise awareness about domestic violence, and subscribe for more true crime content that honors victims and seeks justice. Your engagement helps these important stories reach more people who need to hear them.